So good morning, colleagues. I think as we have now gone past the 8 o'clock hour, it's useful for us to begin to get started on this webinar. I know that for some of us, it's morning, others in the afternoon, and others in the evening, so we may get additional attendees as they come in. I'm Alan Fox, the Deputy Director for the Independent Evaluation Office of the UN Development Program, and very pleased to be with you today. I'd like to go ahead and provide a brief introduction and then pass it to the participants. So if you'll allow me, let me provide just a few words of welcome to all of you. So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar on UNDP support to empowering marginalized groups. And we really appreciate that all of you have set time out of your busy schedules to join us today. You know, empowerment can be defined as the process of enabling people to gain ownership and control over the factors and decisions that shape their lives. UNDP interventions contribute to this process through economic empowerment programs, social protection programs, through enhancing the quality and accessibility of services, civil society support, and helping national and local authorities build their capacities to be inclusive, responsive, and accountable. The aims of such interventions are to empower marginalized groups, to increase their abilities and voice, to expand awareness of their rights, and ultimately to strengthen their position to influence decision-making. Acknowledging the importance of effective programming and implementation in this broad area, the Independent Evaluation Office has synthesized from past evaluations some of the key lessons on empowering marginalized groups. And we published our latest reflections paper on this topic. Reflections is a series of IEO products that offer lessons from past evaluations through rapid evidence assessment. Since its launch in 2020, 18 papers have been produced on various topics within the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as UNDP signature solutions. In today's webinar, our author, Jin Zhang, will present lessons learned on effective identification, targeting, and involvement of vulnerable groups. The lessons draw from a balanced synthesis of country-level evaluations conducted by the IEO and completed by high-quality decentralized evaluations that were commissioned by country offices. On that note, we are also very pleased today to welcome Don Hu Minh and his colleagues from the UNDP Vietnam office, who will share with us some of their experiences working with marginalized groups. After the webinar, you are cordially invited to explore IEO's website to gain access to these and past lessons in full, both in the form of short papers as well as PowerPoint presentations. There is also a following discussion that we will host on the SparkBlue platform, where we invite you to share your views so we can collectively learn from UNDP experiences. This discussion will also contribute to the preliminary stages of our upcoming valuation of UNDP's integration of the leaving no one behind principle. So I hope in conclusion that you will find today's webinar useful and thought-provoking and even inspiring. So at this point, let me pass the floor to Jin, who's going to take us through the key findings and observations from the reflections report. Jin, please, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. And I'm going to start to share my screen. Right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And as Alan already briefly introduced what this reflection series is about. So reflection series look into the past evaluations and capture lessons learned from UNDP's work across its programs. It started in 2020. It is rapid evidence assessment. And today's paper is about UNDP's support for empowering marginalized groups. As Alan already mentioned, the interventions in this regard are threefold. First, empowering marginalized groups to be aware of their rights, dignity, and voice. Second, empowering them in their capacities. And third, to strengthen their position to influence decision-making. So these include a broad range of initiatives as Alan also illustrated, including economic empowerment, social protection, political participation, working from grassroots level to upstream policy level, working directly with marginalized groups or indirectly by benefiting them. So this being said, there are 7 lessons presented in the paper drawn from evaluations, many UNDP evaluations. I'm certain that there are many other lessons that are not included here, but I do hope that these 7 lessons will serve as a start for further discussion on the topic. Due to time constraints, I will focus on 3 out of the 7 lessons today, lesson 1, 2, and 4. In my view, these 3 lessons discuss some basic principles of empowering marginalized groups. So lesson 1. Lesson 1 is about identifying marginalized groups. We know that universalism is important, but targeted actions are needed to reach those marginalized because they are usually disproportionately represented among those left behind. Different groups also benefited from the same intervention differently. For example, those who had a higher economic status and educational level were in a better position to exploit opportunities and take advantage of the new skills introduced. In order to put in place effective responses, as suggested by a 2018 UNDP paper, 5 key factors: discrimination, geography, governance, socioeconomic status, and shocks and fragility should be assessed to understand who is vulnerable and why. In UNDP-supported initiatives, there have been inspiring examples of how vulnerable groups and their challenges have been defined. For instance, in Malawi, the National Social Registry Unified Beneficiary Registry has been used as an effective information system for social protection. In Rwanda, UNDP used UDP, I hope I pronounced it correctly, a traditional long-standing practice and culture of mutual assistance to identify the most vulnerable beneficiary populations and address inequality, especially in the disaster-affected districts. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, many country offices conducted analysis or assessments of the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19. This helped identify the most vulnerable groups and how the crisis has impacted them, and subsequently contributed to the development of evidence-based strategies. In Mongolia, UNDP's impact assessment on vulnerable groups and value chains influenced the COVID-19 law, which profiled the impact of the crisis on those left behind, such as the elderly, women-headed households, and the families of herders. In Vietnam, the impact assessment on micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, poor households, and ethnic minorities informed the National Socioeconomic Response Plan. With many good examples, we also see that vulnerable groups are often identified on a more ad hoc basis, which has led to mistargeting. For instance, some social protection systems are gender blind, thus shortchanging women's and girls' rights and options. In addition, although targeted numbers are important indicators to measure the reach of interventions, they are not sufficient to reflect changes made at the outcome level. In some projects in microfinance, the numbers of participants were used as indicators of progress, but no information was provided regarding effects on the economic situation of those involved, either in short term or longer term. As a result, there was a lack of data considering the changes made to people's lives. Therefore, impact and changes require additional data and evidence beyond targeted numbers. Lesson 2. So lesson 2 is about intersecting vulnerabilities. Changes of marginalized groups intersect, often compounding deprivation and reinforcing their disadvantage. For example, climate change worsened existing poverty and inequalities, especially for those disadvantaged. The COVID-19 pandemic, which we are all experiencing, has not only revealed how interconnected and vulnerable we all are, but also amplified existing inequalities. marginalized groups are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Paying attention to intersecting disadvantages and challenges contributes to more effective targeting and better results. For example, the UNDP program for electoral support in Zimbabwe has shown that gender-focused interventions that address the intersection of vulnerabilities of women at government and community levels could bring notable results for both women's empowerment and for successful democratic process. However, evaluations note that intersecting vulnerabilities are often not addressed through programming. For instance, in work on gender, when disability is referenced at all, it tends to be an afterthought instead of being part and parcel of an integrated approach designed to secure effective and lasting change. In many efforts to combat HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, materials on ways to reduce the risk of contracting these diseases are often produced in inaccessible formats, which often cannot be used by individuals with disabilities. Integrated approach addresses intersecting elements of multiple crises. A lack of processes to support a more integrated approach to planning and programming often resulted in responses without complementarity and synergy. In conflict-affected contexts, for example, the intersection between conflict, drought, internal placement, and food insecurity was missed in some interventions. We had projects on each driver of conflict and displacement, food insecurity, and lack of services, but these were not synthesized. As for integrated approach, or we call it this systematic or synthesized or holistic approach, Lesson 5 in the paper discussed about it. Integrated approaches reflect cross-sectoral nature and the broad range of actors involved. We found that integrated approach tend to better address complexity and to increase scalability and sustainability of empowerment results. So lesson 4. Lesson 4 is about engaging marginalized groups. Nothing about us without us. Marginalized groups should participate in the planning and implementation of interventions as active change agents. However, this is not always the case. They were sometimes framed only as beneficiaries of services. This undermines transformative outcomes. For instance, in conflict responses, early recovery, peace building, and state building, viewing women simply as beneficiaries, a minimalist approach to gender equality and women's empowerment has significantly undermined peace and security efforts. The most effective empowerment strategies are those that build on and reinforce voice and participation and ensuring autonomy in decision-making. For instance, the formulation of effective disability-inclusive strategies requires consultations with people with disabilities and their representative organizations. In Lebanon, for instance, UNDP brought together communities to undertake conflict assessments and identify solutions to address some of the conflict drivers. Time was spent in discussions and in negotiations to guarantee buy-in and ownership from stakeholders. And in Somalia, the introduction of social entrepreneurship, and particularly the focus on stimulating self-directed livelihood generation ideas, empowered beneficiaries while departing from a supply-driven approach. So I will stop here. In brief, these 3 lessons mentioned look at identifying marginalized groups, addressing intersecting vulnerabilities, and engaging targeted groups as agents of change. The other 4 lessons in the paper, which we didn't talk here, discussed tackling the context-specific roots of inequities, integrated approach, long-term commitment, and the importance of implementation of policy changes. Many colleagues here have experience on the ground, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and experience. Next, our colleague Do Hu Minh from the Vietnam office will show us concrete example of how they have worked with marginalized groups. Minh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jin Chang. Yes. Good evening from Vietnam. It is my great honor in the next few minutes, I have a chance to share with you the 4M initiative for ethnic minority development in my country. So in the context, next slide, please. Thank you. In the context, as you know that the poverty now exists mainly among the ethnic minority people as a marginalized group in Vietnam. While consisting of nearly 70% of the country population, EM people account for over 90% of extreme poverty and more than 50% of multi-dimensional poverty in Vietnam. So we call it the pocket of poverty among ethnic minority people. We find out that there are three main barriers for them to participate in as well as benefit from the country development. The first one, geographic barrier. The second one, economic barrier. And the last one, linguistic ability, because they hardly speak Vietnamese. Despite their comparative advantages in terms of, for example, their authentic product, speciality of their product, they are very skillful and they have a special cultural aspect. So in this context, in 2020, UNDP in Vietnam has introduced the 4M initiative. So the question is, what does it mean? The 4M is the short form for the short form of the 4M for ethnic minority-led cooperative. The first M is to meet. It means that we create the platform for potential business partner like the government, official, expert, and related stakeholder to meet with EM people. And the second M is match. We match their demand, their potential economic opportunity with the related business or economic partners. And the third M is mentor. Business, business and economic stakeholder and local government work together with the EM women group or cooperative in order to build their capacity and to support them access to the market, use the information technology, etc., to empower their economic opportunity to earn the income. And based on this model, we apply the last M is move. Move, it means that scaling up the successful solution at the national program or at the national level. So this is the process of the 4M, meet, met, mentor, and move. Next slide, please. You can see that we have two key reasons here. The first reason is we have them to improve their income in two provinces, Bắc Cạn and Đắk Nông. You know that at the outset, many people thought that it is very difficult for ethnic minority people, especially women, to use smartphone or to sell their product into the e-commerce platform like the supermarket, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. But after 6 months of experimentation in two provinces, we have 784 EM women as a leader, as well as a member of EM women cooperative has improved their income by 31 to 50%, especially during the social distancing period. They still sell their product on the e-commerce. And additionally, 2,636 people, 71% of them are women, has expanded their supply raw material products in the market as well as in the e-commerce platform like Facebook, Zalo, and you know that they can sell their specialty product on the market, on the e-commerce platform. And by 2020 and up to now, this model still continue expansion. For example, by the end of 2021, from 49 cooperative has expanded to 101. And by the end of this year, 2021, this model has been widened to additional 2 provinces of Lào Cai and Sơn La with the same approach. So this is the first reason. The second reason is we have used this lesson learned, this reason at the grassroots level to share and to discuss with policymakers at the central level. And by the end of this year, we have successfully integrated this model in the National Targeted Program on Socio-Economic Development in ethnic minority and mountainous area for the periods of 2021 to 2030 with 11.5 billion US dollar. This is very big program for ethnic minority people. And based on the experimentation, we have withdrawn 3 key lessons as follows. The first one, we should focus on the key role of UNDP as an ecosystem and capacity builder. The second one, UNDP should be the connector of or the promoter of EM women economic empowerment. And the last one, connecting the experimentation at the grassroots level with the policymaker at the national level is the unique comparative advantage of UNDP in Vietnam. So this is the 3 key lessons we have withdrawn. And for further information, you can visit the following link with the video and the fact sheet of the 4M initiative. And lastly, any question from you are very much welcome. Thank you very much.
Don Hu Minh, excellent, very much appreciated and very interesting in terms of the 4M work that the office has been managing in Vietnam. So very much appreciated your presentation as well, Jin Zhang, in terms of the your run through of the reflections paper and some of the key points to it. Colleagues, we have time that we've set aside now for questions and comments from you, both for the speakers, as well as reflections from some of the activities within your offices. And I know our team has reached out to some of our colleagues in the Rwanda, Albania, and Lebanon offices because we've cited some of their good works as well. We are quite pleased to get comments and questions. You have the option to use the mechanical hand, and I'll find it and call on you. You can also use the chat if you have specific questions that you'd rather put in writing, and I would be pleased to read it out. But I know that both Jin and Min are quite ready to respond to you in terms of questions on the issues that you've just heard from them on. And as I say, we would be pleased to get additional reflections from the rest of you. I have found in my own experience that this is a critical issue for us. Back in 2016, we did a global evaluation of UNDP's work on disabilities inclusive development that I was proud to participate in. And we really paid a lot of attention at that point to the ways that UNDP is engaging with persons with disabilities and the opportunities for improvement for that. So it's always interesting to me to see what has changed over that period. We have a hand up already, and I appreciate then if I could call on Ola Al-Haddad. You have the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for the presentation and for this invitation. It's really interesting. This is Ola, a gender specialist from UNDP Yemen office. I have a question for Juan with regards to how you engaged men into this initiative. Especially, we know the challenges that comes with ignoring them and isolate, like targeting only women. That might create a kind of violence in households or other challenges, issues as well. So I'm interested to listen and learn from your experience how you've been able to overcome these challenges and how you exactly engaged them into that initiative. Thank you. Over.
Well, thank you for the question. And as we await other questions and comments, Min, why don't you go ahead and respond?
Thank you, Ola, for the very interesting questions on how we have overcome the challenges of ignoring the men and only focus on the women. As you know that in Vietnam, most of the advantage of the company or cooperative belong to men, but in the ethnic minority people, especially in our country, the Hmong, we call it the Hmong ethnic minority people, is the most minority. Most of them are women who are the breadwinner in the family. They are very active, they are very intelligent, they are very skillful, they are very hardworking. That's why in this area, the women play even the more important role in comparison with the men. And with this project, we also show that the ethnic minority women are skillful and they are really able to apply we call it the 4.0 technology, like the smartphone, and they use the e-commerce. That's why we only focus on selecting the EM women-led cooperative. Of course, there are still about 40%, about 30% of the members are men, because they are mixed in the cooperative. That's why we have 71% of the members are women, and the rest are the men. It is not so challenging for us to overcome it, because we only give the priority to the woman-led cooperative. So just to prove that the women, especially the EM women, are very capable, are very skillful, and they can apply the technology like smartphone and also the e-commerce. In the past, many people thought that it were impossible, but we have proved that it is possible. And this model has been shared with the policymaker at the government at the central level, and they have appreciated and witnesses this evidence-based model, and they have integrated this initiative and mechanism into the national targeted program. Of course, with this model, we in this national targeted program, it will apply for both men and women at the national level, not only focus on women. But in our project, in our initiative, we focus on the women. But at the national level of the government, it will apply universal for everyone, especially the poor. Thank you.
Excellent, and thank you very much for the response on that. We have Limia, your hand is up. Please, we'd be pleased for you to take the floor. Limia, are you online with us? I see you opened up your camera. Please, we'd be pleased to get your question or comment.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well, and thank you for the presentations. Really interesting. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're having a little difficulty hearing you. Yeah, you might as well turn off your camera and see if that improves the sound. Please, please try again.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yeah, it's much better. Thank you. Please go on.
I was just saying thank you for the presentations. Very interesting, and interested to hear more about the forums and how it worked. Maybe just a couple points from our experience in Albania to add on to the points already raised. I think one thing that I've been grappling with here with the government, but also I think internally as international organizations, is that we tend to lump marginalized groups into one group and try and drive policies for all of them. And I think we are at a time now where we need to really depart from that and really seek policies that are individualized, whether it's for disabilities or ethnic groups, or other LGBTI and so forth. And I know that we do have specialists in the various areas, but we don't really dissect the policies. And I know that it's difficult to do the same with governments. So unless we do it ourselves, it's hard to push it in through government policy. So many of the governments I've worked with would have one policy for marginalized groups, one measure, for example, in COVID for all the marginalized groups, not realizing the differences between them. And I think we need to drive that a little more as UNDP. I think a second point for me is the involvement in local government. Now, we do very well at the policy level, at central government. We do very well with civil society. But the majority of these policies, budgets, actions actually happen at the local government level. And one thing I've noticed in both Albania and the Gambia was that the local governments were not always ready and capable to administer or dispense these responsibilities. And I think there needs to be more focus on that level. Finally, I think within programming, I know we always say this, but we can't say it enough. The peeling of the various marginalization layers, I always call it the onion that you have to peel layer by layer, because usually groups have more than one layer of marginalization, and addressing each one of those issues, the core causes within the program, and not leaving it for another program so that you have 4 different programs, one on the economic side, one on the employment side, one on the, education, one on the social policies that integrates them. And then the final point I would make to all of us and the UN family in particular is that we have to strike a balance between introducing the new ideas, the new principles out there, whether they are the social floor, the care policies, and balance that with where that government is, their capacities, their policies, and find ways of really piloting or even driving these innovative ideas that could really, I think, be a leapfrog for some of these countries if we manage to do it well, and if we manage to also get the UN family around it. I'll stop there, but very, very interesting, and interested to hear the rest of it and any comments that the colleagues also have on these points. Thank you.
Mimi, very interesting, and appreciate your insights. In our disabilities evaluation back in 2016, I was very pleased and impressed to travel to Albania to see the good works that we're carrying on there, and certainly your reflection to on the need to make sure we don't try to take a one-size-fits-all approach, as well as how we engage effectively with local governments, I think is a very important lessons for us. Certainly another one that we've thought about from our side on evaluation is, how do we identify and tailor specific projects as you indicate, but also do it at a scale that reflects what a global multinational institution like the UNDP should be working on. So that issue of scaling and expanding programs so that they take on a larger scope at the same time that we're trying to identify specific kinds of programs for specific marginalized communities, I think is certainly a challenge that many have faced. Maxwell Gomera, you have your hand up, and please, if you could take the floor, we'd be pleased to have you ask your question or make a comment.
Good afternoon. I don't know if it's him or me raising, as I got the invitation from him. Nadine from the UNDP Rwanda Country Office. I just wanted to share one particular point which might be useful to all of us as far as evaluations are concerned. We have been contributing to the empowerment of persons with disabilities, but one of the challenges which remains across is that we really don't have very clear baselines. So moving forward, or as a lesson for all of us, is also to invest into having data which could legitimize the level of our contribution. If we have a certain number, and as agency, as UNDP, we support 5 or 10 out of 1 million, how big is our contribution and how small is our contribution? So with some of the new disability inclusion strategy of the UN, and with a number of countries also engaging into this, maybe we also need to dig into the vulnerabilities and see, even including in a particular group, let's say person with disability, who are the most vulnerable and how many of them and how we're supporting them, so that at a certain period of time we can, in a very, I would say, in a very legitimate way, claim that we contributed. And we can also prove the impact of the contribution up to that certain magnitude. So that was only a lesson also we got from the Rwanda Country Office, which I wanted to share widely.
No, excellent. Thank you very much, and appreciate to hear from the Rwanda office. And I think you put your finger on a really important point, and that is, how do we establish accurate baselines when we recognize, of course, that there's a certain stigma attached to self-identification of being in a situation where you are marginalized for one reason or another, and how do we get around that in terms of being able to really have a better understanding of the population at risk. So I certainly welcome others of our colleagues in attendance who have good views on that matter, and perhaps Jin, if you recall, in the reflection paper, particular lessons in terms of baseline setting, I think that would be very much appreciated to get a response. Min, I know that you had a question from Richard Tinsley in the chat. Questions in terms of how they measured the economic advantage changes at the cooperative level or individual level. If at the cooperative level, how much of the advantage was consumed with cooperative overhead and how much actually reached the members. I don't know if you'd be prepared to take the floor and respond to Richard. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I think it is very good question. You also mentioned it already, because I don't have much time to describe about the initiative from mid, mentor, and move. So at the mid stage, it means that we generated the platform for different stakeholders, like the business partner, local authorities, and also the technical staff that we meet, and then we match the potential, like we explore what is the strength of the EM people. Do they have any like potential economic opportunity what are their weaknesses, for example, what are their bottleneck. So based on this meet and match event, we build up the baseline. You have mentioned very correctly about the baseline, in which we have recorded on the baseline of the EM cooperative, for example, how many members do they have, what kind of line machine they are owning, and what kind of capacity do they need. So based on that, we have the baseline and even the income, the monthly income of each member, like how many members are directly involving in the production of this cooperative, and how many members do they have, the family member. So we have all these kind of data. We use it as the baseline data. And then the point I really want to share with you is a mentor. The mentoring process is very important, because for the ethnic minority people, especially the women, and as you know, the person with disabilities, they have many difficulty to access to the market, access to the financing resources, etc. It means that they have many difficulty, and even the geographical barrier, as I mentioned earlier, that they are living in the remote area. It is difficult to them to sell their product at the market, at the city or something like that. So mentoring is a process. The local people, the technical people, the business partner have to work closely, hand in hand, with the EM women cooperative, in order to teach them, to coach them. Mentoring, it means that coaching them how to produce, how to pack their product, and how to take the picture, and how to market it, their product in the e-commerce market. So mentoring is a process, and in which we can measure not only about the income increase, but also their capacity. For example, at the first month they have learned this, second month they have gained this skill, and the third month they have sell their product, and the price has been increased. Not only the price, but also the quantity, the quality has been increased, and it gradually meet the demand of the market. And during the mentoring process, the technical or the key partner also coach the EM cooperative how to adjust, how to change their product. For example, they usually produce the perfume, but at the social distancing period, the hand washing is needed. So they change their product in order to meet the market, and based on that, not only the income has been increased, but they also gain the market information for sustainable development.
Great. Thank you for the. No, absolutely. Well explained. In the couple of minutes that we have remaining, Jin, can I put you back on the podium to make a couple of final wrap-up comments from your end? It would be appreciated. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, colleagues. A really interesting discussion. Actually, also, I have learned a lot from you, your experience and the insights from the ground. A couple of things I probably want to emphasize here again, which also already addressed in the paper. There are really no exact and universal standards for successful empowering interventions, because this is really context specific. So we do need to analyze in your own context the rules of inequality, and then different vulnerabilities, and then in order to design and plan and implement. And second, I do think probably we need to make more efforts in planning and programming in the process of planning and programming in order to design the integrated approach, and in order to mobilize resources for that, and think about the plan, also including the monitoring mechanism in the process in order to measure the impact and the outcome. And then third one is I really think empowering of marginalized groups. So empowerment, it's a long-term commitment because we cannot do just one CPT cycle or 2 CPT cycle. It's a long-term battle, if I say so. So that's several view from my part, and which I think it's probably important, but you have probably a lot of challenges on the ground, including conceptualizing, operational, and the funding. And then we actually really look like to hear from you, your experience, including our SparkBlue discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much, Jin. And again, a strong paper and certainly of interest to our colleagues. As we wrap up, can I please put Sanjui Singh on the podium very quickly to be able to explain just the SparkBlue e-discussion that we have put together on this subject. Sanjui?
Thank you, Alan. Colleagues, we have a SparkBlue discussion on IEO Reflections SparkBlue page. And this discussion connects to the reflections paper, as well as to the upcoming formative evaluation. My colleague has added on the chat on how you can join the group and you can participate in the discussion. And we would love to have your thoughts. Thank you.
Sanjui, thank you. And colleagues, that wraps up our webinar for today. Thank you so much for your participation and for your interest in what we know is a crucial subject for our organization. Thanks to Don Hu Min and of course to Jin Zhang for your presentations and for the information that you provided. Many thanks also for those who are raising questions and including information in the chat. Wish you all the best for the rest of your day, and certainly safe travels and safe management of your daily lives in the midst of a pandemic that keeps continuing on. So again, from the IEO, thank you and have a good day. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.